everyone, this is Mindy Egan for Lawnfawn, and in today's video we are going to make a monochromatic slimline card. Monochromatic cards are a lot of fun to make because you're using a limited color selection. You can use this theme with any type of card, but I'm going to make a fun Halloween card using Fangtastic Friends that has all these cute bats on it, and also the Fangtastic Friends add-on stamp set. I kind of had an idea how I wanted the card to lay out, so I picked out the images that would fit my slimline, and I'm going to stamp them onto some 80-pound white cardstock using the Lawnfawn Jet Black ink, which is alcohol friendly. After I stamp them down using a stamp positioner, I'm going to color them with my Copic markers, which is an alcohol-based marker. So the markers that I'm using today is C8, C6, C4, and C3. But you can do this in any shades. You can do blues, greens, even oranges. Really, any color combination would work with this. One of the reasons I like creating monochromatic cards is there isn't a ton of thought process involved as far as color selection. So I am using grays for my images, which means I'm going to use grays for my background. If you wanted to color your bat maybe a purple shade, then I would have used purples for my background. So I don't have to worry about what colors are going to look good, what color my grass needs to be, or anything like that. It just makes everything a lot simpler. And honestly, sometimes I think it helps get my mojo back going. The only thing I really took time to think about was the direction of my image. For example, this bat that's hanging upside down is most likely going to be under the moon that I'm going to use. So whatever parts of the bat were going to be closest to that light source, that is where I placed my lightest marker color. Same thing for this bat, because it's most likely going to be positioned under my light source on my card, for example, the moon, which I'm going to be stenciling on. Then I placed my lightest color closest to that light source and my darkest shade, which is the C8, towards the bottom or the part that's furthest away from the light source. When I was adding in those light and dark areas, I did it by section of the body. So for example, I put the darkest color on the side of the head or the side of the wing or on the side of the body. Maybe there's a wing that's overlapping the body. So I break mine down into sections, but you could just start and color all the way across, meaning your darkest color is all the way to the right and just have it blend out to the lightest. So you can do it either way, as a whole image or break it down into sections. Now these bats are both facing a particular direction. So example, this one is facing to the right, which means it's probably going to be facing my moon. So that is the side that I put the lightest color on. I was going to try and stick to a 3-color combo for my markers, but I really needed that C3 to come in and add just a little bit of brightness to that highlight area. And really, since I'm sticking to a monochromatic look, it didn't break my heart to bring out another marker because I'm not going to have a ton of markers scattered all over my desk. The spider was a little tricky because there isn't a lot of area to color there, but I still managed to make it work. And I really hesitated on the ears because I really wanted to color the ears pink. That's just my natural color that I gravitate towards, but I stuck to my monochromatic and just used those same grays to color in the ears. So once I have all of my images colored in, I'm going to take out the coordinating dies, line them up over the image, holding them down with a Post-it tape and running them through the die cut machine. Then I can move on to working on my background. I'm using the nighttime sky stencil because I want to do the moon, and I have this piece of cardstock here that's 80-pound, and it's going to be a little bit bigger than my slimline panel. So I masked off the areas I didn't want on the card front, and I'm using pumice stone distress oxide ink. So that's a really light gray, just kind of lightly blended that on. Now I should have placed my mask over the moon while my stencil was in place, but I always forget that step. So I brought the mask in afterwards, and then I'm starting at the very top of my cardstock with that pumice stone distress oxide ink and kind of blending it down about 1/3 of the way down. You're going to see later on when I remove that mask that I was a little off placing that on top of my moon, and I'll show you how I'll fix that. But in the meantime, I'm continuing down the front of my card, coming in with hickory smoke distress oxide ink and kind of adding that to the center, blending that up into the pumice stone. I'm using blending brushes today to apply my ink, but if you have some foam tools that you could be blending on, you're going to get darker color faster. When you use blending brushes with oxide inks, it's going to take a little longer to build up that intensity of the color. So after hickory smoke, I am coming in with black soot distress oxide ink, starting from the bottom and working my way up into that hickory smoke. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't loving this at first. It was kind of looking like a disaster, but I'm sticking with it, and you'll be able to see how everything comes together once we start adding other elements. In the meantime, I'm going to go back through my colors to try and smooth out those transitions. And one of the great things I love about oxide inks is they layer on top of each other really well, meaning that even though black is darker than a gray, you're still seeing that dark gray going on top of the black. And same thing with that pumice stone. You can really see how that's overlapping the hickory smoke. So I removed my mask, and then I saw I didn't line it up great. So I'm coming back over that with the pumice stone and just lightly blending onto the moon to try and help cover that up a little bit. I'm going to bring the original stencil back in, kind of mask off my areas, and add these details to the moon. I wasn't going to at first, but I think this helps kind of disguise that I lined up that mask wrong. I'm going to shift my stencil, mask off some areas, and this time I'm going to ink blend on these clouds, except I'm using the black soot. So I'm applying that ink through the stencil, and then I'm going to shift this again to the other side and add the other two clouds in there. Now, a thought I had afterwards that I think would be really cool is you have that black soot ink for your clouds, but maybe come in with a little bit of white pigment ink at the very top of the clouds. I think that would really cast a great highlight to the clouds from that light source, which is my moon. So after this is done, I'm going to take the small slimline die and die cut out my panel. And then I'm also going to take black cardstock and die cut that with the large slimline. So that's going to be my main card base. I am going to be heat embossing on top of this. So I'm using my heat tool to dry that distress oxide ink. If we don't let this dry, the embossing powder is going to stick and it's not going to work. So I'm testing this first. I'm prepping that with my anti-static powder tool. I'm going to sprinkle on the silver embossing powder, and if it sticks, it's still wet. We need to wait for it to dry. But since the embossing powder slid right off, I know it's ready and I can heat emboss my sentiment. So I brought in my sentiment, and I'm using a MISTI ruler to help make that straight on the front of the card, because at this point I would probably cry if I stamped it crooked. So once I know that that's straight, I can pick that up with the door of my stamping tool, remove the ruler, prep that again with the anti-static powder tool, and ink up my sentiment in the white pigment ink. So I will just gently stamp that down and then sprinkle on the silver embossing powder. I'm going to tap off that excess, and I have my heat tool warming up, and I always like to kind of go on the back real quick and then bring that to the front, and it just makes my embossing powder melt super quick. Now, this wouldn't be a true night sky if I didn't add flicks to this, so I am just taking my Post-it tape and covering my sentiment and my clouds, because I really don't want the flicks on that. I want it more in the background of the sky. Then I added a couple drops of liquid stardust and white Copic ink to an acrylic block, mix that together, and I'm flicking this over the background with my paintbrush. I'm turning my paintbrush and kind of turning the direction of the flicks because I didn't want that on the moon either, but I didn't want to mask it off. And then I'm just drying those real quick with my heat tool. Now I'm going to start attaching all of my elements to the front of the card. To be honest, I was actually going to use the peekaboo die for the slimline and kind of have flaps opening up to the scene, but I just really did not want to cover up any part of this background. So for my branches and the spider, I am adding those using a tape runner. I want to add dimension to this by popping up the rest of my images with foam squares. So I brought in the images about where I wanted them to be, making sure that nothing is going to cover up my sentiment. And then I can add some small foam squares to the back. So I have my couple bats that are going to hang from the branches, and then these other two are kind of pointing in the direction or facing in the direction of my sentiment. So hopefully drawing your eye into that. I'm going to add this panel to a piece of white cardstock that is cut about 1/4 of an inch bigger than the actual panel, but I thought that was a little bit too much. So after I attached it, I just took that over to my paper trimmer and trimmed that down. So I just have a sliver of a white border. And then I'm adding that to that black cardstock that I die cut earlier from the large slimline die. Now my last finishing touch that I want to add is adding these little highlight areas with a white Jelly Roll pen. I think this helps really make those images pop off the front of the card so they're not getting too lost in that background. And after I'm done with that, that's going to finish off this monochromatic card. I really love how this came out and that background, and I really need to do more monochromatic cards because they are fun to make and just really easy to do. Thanks for joining and see you next time.